The naming engine had identified 400 million objects without a single error, and now it stopped on the gray ship and would not give an answer. Senior name-giver Issa Telmar watched the silence happen. She had served the Tessari nominate for 60 years, and in all that time she had never seen the index hesitate. The index did not hesitate. That was the whole point of it. You showed it a thing, anything, and it told you the true name of that thing, and once a thing had its true name, it belonged to the nominate forever. A star had a name. A moon had a name. A grain of dust on a forgotten world had a name, and the day the index spoke that name, the dust became Tessari property by the oldest law there was. The gray ship had no name, not a hidden name, not a name in a language the index had never met. No name at all. Issa leaned closer to the long curved readout that ran the length of her station. The light from it was the soft gold the nominate used for ordinary work. The gold of a thing being measured and filed and closed. The gold flickered now. It did not want to flicker. She had never seen it do this. The object hung in the dark 40,000 strides off the index ship, drifting on a slow tumble, showing no power, no signal, no heat that mattered. It looked like nothing. It looked like a long flat slab of dark metal with rounded ends, scarred and dull, the kind of hull a poor world might build, and a poorer world might fly. There were no guns she could see. There were no markings. There was a registry plate on the flank, the way every working ship in the dark carried one, and the plate said the vessel was a cargo hauler named the Wandering Larch, out of a colony the nominate had filed and forgotten 3 centuries ago. The index had read the plate. The index had agreed the plate said Wandering Larch, and then the index had been asked the only question that mattered, the question the nominate asked of everything that crossed its border, and the index had gone quiet. What are you? That was the question. It was always the question. The naming engine took the question, and it took the object, and it returned a true name, and the true name was the leash. For 9,000 years, the nominate had ruled this arm of the galaxy, not with fleets, though it had fleets, and not with fear, though it had fear, but with names. To be named by the index was to be known. To be known was to be owned. No species had ever found a way around it, because there was no way around it. A thing was what it was. The index simply said so out loud. Now the engine that had never failed sat in front of a dull gray slab and said nothing at all. Issa keyed the override. She was allowed to. Senior name-givers carried the right to push the index, to make it speak when it lingered, because sometimes an object was simply complicated, and the engine needed a nudge. She pushed. The readout filled with the soft gold, and then the gold curdled. Words began to assemble at the bottom of her station, the engine reaching for a name, and the words were wrong. They were not a name. They were the engine talking to itself, which it was not supposed to do where she could see. Object exceeds index. Object exceeds index. Provide reference. No reference exists. Provide reference. She had read the manuals. There was no entry in any manual for this. The index did not ask her for help. The index helped her. That was the order of the world. Issa sat very still and felt, for the first time in her long, careful life, the floor of a certain thing move under her. She was not a soldier. The nominate did not really have soldiers in the way the old warrior species did, the ones it had named and tamed long ago. The nominate had name-givers, and wardens to carry out what the name-givers decided, and a fleet to make sure the decisions stuck. Issa had spent her life in this quiet hall on the spine of the index ship, the great vessel they called the First Tongue, naming worlds. She had named 1,100 worlds. She had been proud of that. Each one a clean entry, each one a thing made known. She looked at the gray slab and understood that it was looking back, and that it did not feel known at all. Around her, the hall began to fill. Word traveled fast on the First Tongue when the index stalled. Junior name-givers drifted to their stations. The warden of the watch, a hard old male named Kesson Var, came down the central aisle with his hands folded behind his back, the way he always walked, as if nothing in 9,000 years could surprise him. He stopped beside her station and read the readout, and his folded hands came apart. He did not say what is wrong. He said the only thing a warden could say. Push it again. She pushed it again. The engine reached, and failed, and this time the failure was longer, and at the end of the failure, A single line of plain gold sat on the readout, and the line was not the engine talking to itself. The line was an answer. The first answer the index had managed. Unnamed. Kesenvar stared at the word. That is not a name. No, Issa said. Everything has a name. Yes, she said, it does. They both looked at the gray slab on the long readout, drifting, silent, scarred, carrying a plate that said it was a cargo hauler, and around it the whole certain order of the nominate held its breath. The first tongue was not alone in that part of the dark. It never traveled alone. It was the most precious object the nominate owned, the engine of all its law, and it moved inside a ring of escorts the way a queen moves inside a wall of guards. 40 warships rode with it, lean and bright and proud, each one named and known and certain of itself, each one carrying the gold sigil of a vessel the index had personally blessed. They had names like Faithful Reckoning, and Clear Tongue, and We Have Counted You. They had never lost. The nominate's escort ring had never, in 9,000 years, fired on an enemy that did not already know it was beaten, because the index always named the enemy first, and a named enemy was a leashed enemy, and a leashed enemy did not fight. The gray slab was not leashed. The gray slab had no name, and the 40 warships, watching it drift, began to feel a thing none of their crews had a word for, which was strange, because the nominate had a word for everything. Issa felt it too. She was a name-giver. Her whole craft was the quiet confidence that the world could be known. And here, 40,000 strides out, a dull gray thing refused to be known, and her confidence did not crack all at once. It cracked the way ice cracks, a long thin line running out ahead of you, across a frozen lake, faster than you can step back. Send a warden cutter, Kesenvar said. Board it. If the index cannot name it from here, we will name it from inside. It was the right order. It was the order 9,000 years of method demanded. You could not name a thing properly from a distance forever. Sometimes you had to go and stand inside the thing and read it close. Issa almost spoke. She almost said wait. She did not know why. She was not a coward, and she was not a seer. But she had spent 60 years learning to feel the moment when the index was about to give her a name, that small settling in the gold when a thing finally agreed to be known. And she had learned its opposite too, though she had only felt the opposite once, very young, on a dead world that had turned out not to be dead. She felt the opposite now. She felt a thing gathering itself to refuse. She said nothing. Wardens did not take weight from name-givers when the method was clear. The cutter launched. It was a small, swift craft, sharp at the nose, crewed by 6 wardens who had boarded 1,000 drifting hulks, and named every one. It crossed the dark toward the gray slab, and the slab did nothing, and the cutter slowed, and matched the slow tumble, and a warden in a hard suit crossed the last short gap on a tether, and set his gloved hand against the dull gray flank, near the registry plate that said, Wandering Larch. In the naming hall, the readout that had said unnamed changed. It did not change to a name. Issa would remember that for the rest of her life, however long that turned out to be. It changed to 2 words, and the 2 words appeared in a gold she had never seen the index use. A deeper gold, almost the color of old blood, and the engine that had named 400 million things without error wrote the 2 words slowly, as if it had finally understood the question and wished it had not. Crew aboard. The gray slab had shown no power, no heat, no signal. A dead hauler drifting in the lane, scarred and abandoned, a thing the poorest world might fly and lose. There was a crew aboard, and the crew had been waiting. The warden on the tether did not report fear. Wardens were not built to report fear. He reported facts. His name was Seville, and his voice came into the naming hall flat and even, the way it should. He said the hull was cold. He said the registry plate was real, stamped and worn the way a working plate wore, not painted on. He said there was a hatch where a hauler's hatch should be, a plain round door with a manual wheel, the kind a poor crew used when they could not afford a power lock. He said the wheel turned. He said the hatch opened. He did not say the next thing for 4 seconds, and 4 seconds is a very long time for a warden who has boarded 1,000 wrecks. Then he said, there is light inside. Issa watched the readout. The deep gold words still sat there, crew aboard. The index had not changed them. It had not added a name. It was simply holding the two words up like a thing it did not want to put down. What kind of light? Kesenvar said into the channel. Working light, Seval said. Steady, clean. A pause. It is warm in here. That was wrong. The hull was cold. The warden had read it cold from outside, dead cold, the cold of a ship with no power and no crew. But inside it was warm and lit, which meant the cold was a face the ship wore on the outside, a still gray mask, and behind the mask, the ship was alive and awake, and had been alive and awake the whole time the index struggled to name it. Issa understood then that the ship had let itself be read as dead. It had chosen the reading the wardens got. A thing that could choose what it looked like to a naming engine was a thing the nominate had no place for in its law, because the whole law rested on the idea that a thing was what it was and could not pretend otherwise to the index. The index saw through pretending. That was its gift. Except it had not seen through this. It had been shown a corpse, and had believed the corpse until a warden put his hand on warm metal. Go further in, Kesenvar said. Seval went further in. His 5 companions followed. The cutter held station outside, sharp nose pointed at the slab, and in the naming hall the senior staff gathered behind Issa's chair and watched the channel feed, and the 40 escort warships in their bright ring watched the slab, and the slab drifted on its slow tumble and did nothing. Seval described a corridor, plain, gray, honest, handrails worn smooth by use, doors with manual wheels, a floor with the dull shine of a deck, walked on for a very long time. He described a smell, which was strange, because wardens did not usually describe smells, but he said it smelled lived in, the way a place smells when people have eaten there, and slept there, and worried there for years. He found a galley. There were cups in it, 6 cups, set out, as if 6 people had been about to drink and had stepped away. This is a hauler, one of the junior name-givers said quietly behind Issa. It is only a hauler that someone has lived on a long time. The index choked on a hard case. It happens once a century. It did happen. Issa wanted to believe it. She had built her 60 years on the index never being wrong, and a thing that is never wrong has, in truth, only been right so far, and the day it is first wrong is a day you do not want to live to see. So she reached for the easy answer the junior offered, that this was a stubborn hauler, an old crew of squatters in a dead colony ship, a thing too poor and too patched to read clean. She had reasons to want the easy answer, and the reasons were 9,000 years deep. The index had never failed because the index could not fail. That was not pride. That was the whole architecture of the nominate, and Issa had spent her life inside the architecture, and she knew exactly how much weight rested on the engine never being wrong. 1,000 worlds paid tribute to the nominate, not because they feared its fleets, but because the index had named them, and a named thing did not argue with the one who held its name. The moment the galaxy learned the index could be wrong, that there existed even one object the engine could not file, the whole structure of names and tributes and quiet obedience would begin to question itself, world by world, and there would not be enough wardens in the arm to hold it together. The index was not just an engine, it was the load-bearing wall of an entire civilization, and Issa, watching the cups in the galley, felt the first hairline crack run up that wall. So she did what anyone would do who had built a life on a wall that was beginning to crack. She told herself the crack was a trick of the light. She told herself it was a stubborn hauler. She told herself the junior was right. Search the galley properly, Kesenvar said into the channel, because he was old and he did not trust easy answers the way the junior did. Tell me what the crew ate. Tell me how long ago they ate it. A hauler crew leaves a hauler's leavings. If this is squatters, there will be squatters' leavings. If it is something else, there will be nothing, because something else will have wanted you to find exactly the cups and nothing more. Seval searched the galley properly. He reported the cups. He reported that the cups were warm, faintly, as if set out moments before. He reported that there was nothing else. No crumbs, no waste, no leavings of any kind. 6 warm cups, set out in a galley, on a ship that had shown the index a dead cold hull, and around the cups a cleanliness that no working crew in the dark had ever kept, because working crews in the dark were tired and poor and human in their mess, whatever species they were, and this galley was not tired and not poor and not messy. It was staged. It had been arranged to be found. The cups are a sentence, Issa said slowly. Someone set them out so that we would read them. 6 cups means 6 crew. They are telling us how many they are. They want us to know the count. A thing that hides does not tell you its count. A thing that is sure of itself tells you the count, because the count is not a weakness when you are sure. 6, Kesenvar said. 6 against a fleet of 40. 6, Issa agreed, and the number sat in the naming hall like a stone, because 6 was not a raiding party, and 6 was not a desperate crew of squatters. 6 was a message written in cups, and the message said, "We are 6, and 40 of you is not enough, and we have set out our cups so that you will remember, afterward, that we told you so." Then Seville found the second corridor, and the easy answer died. He did not understand what he was looking at. He said so. He said the second corridor was not like the first. The first corridor was a hauler's corridor, plain and honest and worn. The second corridor was wider and taller, and the walls were not the dull gray of the outer hull. They were dark and smooth and warm to the touch, and they were not flat. They curved. They curved the way the inside of a thing curves, when the thing was grown around a purpose rather than built around a cargo. There were no handrails here. There was no need. The floor told you which way was down even when, Seville said, it should not have been able to. "What is the cargo?" Kesenvar said. His voice had changed a little. Issa heard it. He was reaching for Method too, and Method said, a hauler had a cargo, and if you knew the cargo, you knew the ship. "There is no cargo," Seville said. "A hauler with no cargo." "There is no cargo hold," Seville said. "I have walked the length of it. There is no place to put cargo. The outside is a hauler. The inside is not a hauler. The inside is something else wearing a hauler." In the naming hall, the deep gold words on Issa's readout finally moved. The index, slow and certain and afraid in a way no engine should be able to be afraid, wrote a third line beneath the first two, and the third line was the closest the great machine had yet come to a name. This object was shaped to be mistaken. Issa read it 3 times. The nominate's whole power was the reading of things. And here was the index telling her, in the only words it could find, that the gray slab had been designed, on purpose, with care, to be read wrong, not to hide. Hiding was easy, and the index defeated hiding every day. This was different. This was a thing that wanted to be looked at, that invited the look, that offered itself up as a poor dead hauler precisely so that a naming engine would file it as a poor dead hauler and move on, and a fleet would lower its guns, and a cutter would come, and wardens would walk inside, deeper and deeper, past the cups in the galley, into the corridors that curved. It was bait. The whole ship was bait, and it had worked perfectly, because it had been built by something that understood exactly how the nominate looked at the world, and exactly how to be misread. "Seville," Kesenvar said, "come out." "There is a door ahead," Seville said. "It is open. There is more light. I think it is a... Come out. Now." "I think it is a bridge," Seville said, and his flat warden voice was not flat anymore, and Issa would remember the sound of it for years, the sound of a man who has boarded 1,000 wrecks finally meeting the one that is not a wreck. "There are stations here. There are seats. The seats are..." He stopped. "The seats are the wrong shape." "Wrong how?" Issa said. She had not meant to speak into the channel. She did it anyway. "They are made for a body I have never filed," Seville said. "Tall, narrow at the top. The seat is for a thing that sits upright, and has 2 arms, and looks forward. I have named 900 species. Name giver. I have never named this one." The naming hall was very quiet. "And there is writing," Seville said. "On the stations, lots of writing. A hard, plain script. All straight lines and angles. No curves at all. The script of a people who made their letters with tools, and not with brushes. I am sending it now. Read it. Tell me whose it is." The writing came into the hall. It filled the great readout above the naming floor. Line after line of hard angular marks, sharp and patient and dense. The writing of a species that wrote things down and kept them. Issa had spent 60 years reading the world. She could read 40,000 scripts. The index could read all of them. She fed the writing to the index and asked it the only question. "Whose is this?" The index did not answer. It did not stall this time. It did not curdle. It simply, cleanly, returned the one result it had returned at the very start, the result that should have been impossible, and now was worse than impossible, because now it was attached to a script and a ship full of curved warm corridors and seats, built for an upright body, with 2 arms that looked forward. No reference exists. That cannot be, said the junior name-giver behind her, the one who had wanted it to be a hauler. We have named every species in the arm. Every one. There is no unnamed species. There has not been an unnamed species in 4,000 years. There is one now, Yissa said. She stood up. She was not sure why she stood. Her legs did it. She stood, and she looked at the hard, angular script filling the great readout, the writing of a people the index had never met, and a cold understanding came up through her, the way water comes up through a cracked floor, slow and total, and impossible to push back. The nominate had a map of the named galaxy. It was a beautiful map, 9,000 years in the making, every world a clean point of gold, every species a clean entry, every danger filed and leashed, and the map had edges. Of course it had edges. Every map has edges. Beyond the edges was the unnamed dark, the part of the galaxy the nominate had not yet reached, the part it would reach in its own slow, patient time, naming as it went, the way it had always named, world by world, certain that whatever it found there would also have a name once the index spoke. The nominate had always assumed that the unnamed dark was empty, or near empty, or full of small things waiting to be filed. It had never once assumed that the unnamed dark might have something in it that was bigger than the nominate, older in war than the nominate, and aware of the nominate. It had never assumed the dark might be looking back. It had never assumed the dark might build a ship shaped like a poor dead hauler, and send that ship across the border on purpose, and let a naming engine choke on it, and wait. Something out there had studied the nominate, had learned how it saw, had learned that it ruled by naming, and that an unnamed thing broke the law at its root, and had built, with patience and craft, the one object the nominate could not file, and had crewed it, and had set it drifting in the lane where the first tongue itself would pass, the holiest ship the nominate owned, the very engine of all its names, wrapped in a ring of 40 proud escorts. It was not a hauler that had wandered in. It was a message that had been sent. Seval, Kessenvar said, and now the old warden's voice was completely level again, level the way a voice goes level when a male has stopped hoping and started thinking. Listen to me. Do not touch the stations. Do not touch the writing. Walk back the way you came. Walk, do not run. Get to the hatch. Get back to the cutter. We are leaving this object behind, and we are reporting it to the inmost tongue, and we are not naming it today. Yes, Warden, Seval said. And then Seval said, Warden, the writing is changing. Issa looked up at the great readout. The hard, angular script was rearranging itself, not all of it, a single block of it, in the center, dissolving and reforming, the straight lines and the patient angles flowing into new shapes, and the new shapes were not the alien script anymore. They were Tasari. They were the gold round letters of the nominate's own tongue, the tongue Issa had spoken every day of her life, appearing on the stations of a ship crewed by a species the index had never named. The ship was answering them in their own language. It had read the nominate's tongue off the cutter, off the wardens, off the channel, off the very questions they were asking, and it had learned the tongue, and now it was writing back, and the writing was 4 words, and the 4 words sat in the center of the great readout above the naming floor, while 40 escort warships watched the slab, and the slab drifted, and the cold came up through the floor of the most certain civilization in the arm. You asked what we are. Issa could not breathe. The script flowed again. 4 more words. We are the answer. Out, Kessenvar said. Seval, out. Now, run. I am done with walking. I am at the hatch, Seval said. The wheel is... A pause. The wheel will not turn. The gray slab, which had shown no power, and no heat, and no signal, which had let the index read it as a dead hauler so that this exact cutter would come, and these exact wardens would walk inside, had let them in freely, every door open, every hatch turning, all the way to the bridge. And now the hatch would not turn. It had not trapped them out of malice. Issa understood that, somehow, watching the gold words sit on the readout. It had simply finished letting them in, and there was no further reason to let them out. And a thing that has been mistaken for a hauler by an empire of namers does not owe that empire an open door. We will cut you out, Kesunvar said. Hold position. We are sending a second cutter with cutting gear. We will open that hull from the outside and bring you home. Do you hear me, Seval? We do not leave wardens. I hear you, Warden, Seval said, and there was something in his voice now that Issa had no name for, and she was a name giver, and that was the worst part, that the thing in his voice had no name. But I do not think you can cut this hull. We can cut any hull. I have my hand on the inner wall, Seval said. The warm wall, the wall that curves. I have my cutter against it at full power. There is no mark, Warden. There is no heat. The wall does not notice. I do not think this is metal. I do not think the nominate has named what this is. The great readout flowed one more time. The gold round letters of the nominate, written by the ship. 3 words this time. Calm and plain and patient. The most patient thing Issa had ever read. Send your fleet. She turned and looked at Kesunvar, and Kesunvar looked at the slab on the long readout, the dull gray poor dead hauler that was not a hauler, that had crossed the border to be misread, that had let itself be boarded so that it could speak, that was now asking, in their own tongue, for the 40 proud escort warships of the first tongue to come close. And the worst of it, the thing that would haunt Issa Telmar all her days, was that the order to send the fleet was already half formed in the old warden's mouth, because the method said, you do not abandon wardens, and the method had never, in 9,000 years, been wrong. The gray slab wanted the fleet to come. It had said so. It had asked, in plain words, in their own letters, and the nominate, which ruled the named galaxy because it understood that to name a thing is to know a thing, was about to give the unnamed thing exactly what it had asked for, because it could not yet bring itself to believe that a poor dead hauler had outthought the index. Issa opened her mouth to say the word she had wanted to say at the very beginning. The word, a name giver, was not allowed to say to a warden when the method was clear. She said it now. Wait. Kesunvar did not send the fleet. He looked at Issa for a long moment, and whatever an old warden saw in a senior name-giver's face when she finally broke the rule and said wait, he saw it, and he closed his half-formed order and swallowed it. He had survived 9,000 years of method by knowing exactly when the method had run out of room. It had just run out of room. Hold the ring, he said to the watch officer. No vessel approaches the object, not one. The cutter holds where it is. If the wardens inside can be brought home, we bring them home with patience, not with the fleet. He turned to Issa. You said wait. Tell me why. Because it asked, Issa said. It asked for the fleet. A thing that wants to be left alone does not ask for the fleet. A thing that wants the fleet close has a reason to want the fleet close, and the reason is not good for the fleet. She was thinking faster than she had thought in years, 60 years of careful slow naming falling away, and underneath the slowness, there was a quick mind she had half forgotten she owned. Warden. It let the wardens in, every door. Then it shut the last door. Then it asked for the rest of us. It is not trapping 6 wardens. 6 wardens are nothing to it. It is gathering. It wants the whole ring in one place, close, where it can reach all 40 ships at once. Why would it want that? I do not know, Issa said. But I know that we have spent 9,000 years bringing things close, so we could name them. And now something has spent its own time learning to bring us close. I do not think we should let it finish the sentence. On the channel, Seval's voice came again. Very quiet now. Name giver. The ship is writing again. It is not writing to you. I think it is writing to me. Read it, Kesunvar said. It says, Seval said, and stopped, and started again. It says, you are afraid. That is correct. It says, your masters are not afraid yet. They will be. It says, sit down, Warden. You have walked a long way, and there is nothing left for you to do but watch, and I would rather you watched sitting than standing. The cold in the naming hall was complete now. The ship had named Seval's fear, casually, the way Seval named hulls. It had reversed the whole order of the world. The nominate named. It had never been named. And a poor dead gray hauler had just sat one of its wardens down with a single sentence of kindness that was worse than any threat, because kindness from a thing you cannot understand is the most frightening kindness there is. Seval, Kesunvar said. Sit down." "Yes, Warden," Seville said, and Issa heard him sit. The great readout above the naming floor went dark. All the alien script, all the gold-round Tessari letters, gone at once, the way a face goes still before it speaks. And then the readout lit again, and this time it was not writing. It was a feed. The ship was sending the naming hall a picture from inside its own bridge, freely, the way you open a door you have decided no longer needs to be shut. Issa saw the bridge. She saw the seats made for the upright body with 2 arms. She saw the hard angular script on the dark warm walls. And she saw for the first time the crew of the unnamed ship, and she stopped being able to pretend that the easy answer had ever been possible. There were 6 of them, the way there had been 6 cups in the galley. They were tall and narrow at the top, and they sat upright and looked forward, exactly as Seville had said. They had 2 arms each and faces at the top with eyes set forward, the eyes of a thing that hunts, that judges distance, that decides. They wore plain dark cloth with no gold, no sigil, no rank that the nominate could read. They did not look frightened. They did not look proud. They looked, Issa thought, like people who had done this before, who had crossed a border into an empire that had never heard of them and waited in the dark to be misread, and who knew exactly how the next part went because they had run the next part many times. One of them stood. The standing one stepped toward the place where the feed came from, so that its forward eyes filled the great readout above the naming floor of the first tongue, and the whole of the nominate's holiest ship looked into the face of a species the index could not name, and the standing one began to speak, and the words came into the hall not as the hard angular script anymore, but as sound, in the gold round tongue of the nominate, learned in an afternoon off the channel, and the questions, and the fear. "My name is Edrin Call," the standing one said. "I am the captain of this vessel. You have been trying to identify my ship since the moment we drifted into your lane. I want you to understand that we let you try. We built her to be tried. We registered her as a hauler, and we cooled her hull, and we set the cups out in the galley, and we drifted into the place where your great ship would pass, and we waited for your engine to fail, because we knew it would fail, because we know what your engine is, and we know what it cannot do." The captain paused. The forward eyes moved, slowly, across the feed, as if it could see the whole naming hall through the readout. Every name giver, every warden, Issa standing at her station, with her hand flat on the cold gold surface. "Your engine names things," Edrin Call said. "It is a fine engine. It is named 400 million things, but it can only name a thing that has already agreed, somewhere deep, to be named. Every species you have ever filed was a species that wanted, in its bones, to be known. That is most species. Knowing is comfort. Being filed is being safe. You found a galaxy full of things that wanted to be named, and you named them, and you called it conquest, and it was conquest, of a kind." The captain leaned closer to the feed. "We are not most species. We have never agreed to be named. We do not want the comfort. Where we come from, being named is how the thing in the dark finds you, and so we learned, a long time ago, before we ever met anything like you, to be a people the dark cannot file. That is who we are. That is the whole of who we are. We are the species that refuse to have a true name, and your engine has just met us, and your engine has broken on us, because there is nothing in us for it to grip." The captain was quiet for a moment, and when it spoke again, its voice was lower, and Yisa understood that it was telling her something it did not have to tell her, something that cost it, and she did not yet know why a thing that had already won would spend anything at all. "Let me tell you how a people learns to refuse a name," Edrin Call said. "We did not choose it because it was clever. We chose it because we had to. A long time ago, longer than your 9,000 years, our home was found by something in the dark, and the something was not like you. It did not name us to own us. It named us to eat us. It was patient, and it was vast, and it hunted by knowing, and the more a thing let itself be known, the more surely the something found it, and unmade it. We were loud then. We were proud then. We sang our names into the dark the way young species do, the way you still do, certain that being known was being safe. And the something heard us sing, and it came, and it took half of everything we were before we understood what we had done. We learned the lesson your engine is learning now, except we learned it with our worlds burning, and so we learned it all the way down. We learned that to be named is to be found, and to be found is to be taken, and that the only species that survives a galaxy with a thing like that in it is the species that refuses, with everything it has, to ever be fully known by anything, ever again. The naming hall was silent. Issa could not move. So we became this, the captain said. We unmade our own true name, deliberately, over 1,000 years of the hardest work a people has ever done. We built ships that wear coats. We built a tongue that changes faster than any engine can catch. We learned to drift into a stranger's space, looking like a poor dead hauler, because we learned, in the worst school there is, that the thing which cannot be named is the thing which cannot be hunted. And then, having survived, we went looking through the dark for the thing that had hunted us, and we found it, and we did to it what your engine cannot do to us. We are not telling you this to frighten you, name giver, though it should. We are telling you this so you understand that your engine is not the most powerful thing we have ever met. It is the second. The first one is dead, and we killed it. And we killed it precisely because we had learned to be a people no engine, however perfect, could ever name. Your index is, to us, a smaller and gentler version of the worst thing that ever happened to our kind. That is why we are not afraid of it. We met its bigger brother, in the dark, with our worlds on fire, and we won. Issa heard her own voice come out of her, thin and small in the great hall. What are you? The captain's forward eyes found her, somehow, across 40,000 strides, through a feed it had opened from the inside of a ship the index could not name. You keep asking that, Edrin Call said, almost gently. I will answer it the way your engine could not. We are human. The ship you have been trying to identify is human. It is a warship, name giver. It has always been a warship. The hauler was a coat. We took the coat off an hour ago, when your warden put his hand on the warm wall and felt that it was not metal, and you still have not understood what that means, so I will tell you. It means the coat is the only part of this ship your engine ever saw. Everything under the coat has been here the whole time, awake, reading you, learning your tongue, counting your 40 escorts, mapping the place where your great engine ship rides in the middle of them, like a heart in a chest. We have spent the last hour naming you, name giver. We are very good at it. It turns out it is not hard, once you stop being afraid of the dark. The readout flickered, and the picture of the bridge was joined by a second picture, smaller, in the corner. It was the first tongue. It was the naming hall's own ship, seen from outside, seen from the gray slab's own eyes, the great vessel, and its ring of 40 escorts. Every ship marked, every ship measured, every ship named, in the hard angular human script, the writing of a people who wrote things down and kept them. The nominate had been filed. You sent a cutter to board us, and read us close, Edrin Call said. That was the right method. It is the method we counted on, so we let it come, and we let your wardens walk all the way to the bridge, and we read them close, while they read us. Your warden Seville is a good male. He is sitting down now. He is going to live, because killing him gives us nothing, and we are not in the business of killing things that give us nothing. None of this is about Seville. None of this is about your cutter. This is about the engine. This is about the heart in the chest. The captain straightened. 9,000 years ago, you started naming the galaxy, and you decided that anything you could name, you could own, and anything you could own, you could take, and you have been taking ever since, world by world, species by species, every one of them grateful to be filed, because filing felt like safety. You took a great deal. You are about to find out that you took it on a loan, and the dark has come to collect, and the dark is not most species, and the dark cannot be named. Issa looked at Kesunvar. The old warden was staring at the smaller picture, the picture of his own ship filed in alien script, and his hands were not folded behind his back anymore. They hung at his sides. He looked, for the first time in the 60 years Issa had known him, like a male who did not have the next order. Captain Call, Issa said. Her voice steadied as she used it. A name-giver's voice was a tool, and she reached for the tool. You have made your point. Your ship is what it is. We cannot name it. We accept that. We will withdraw. We will leave this lane. We will report to the inmost tongue that the border has something behind it we did not expect, and we will treat with it properly, as equals, as we have never had to treat with anything. There is no need for what you are about to do. We are listening. You have our attention. You do not need the fleet. For a moment she thought it would work. The captain's forward eyes considered her, and there was something in them that was almost respect. The respect of a hunter for a creature that has finally understood it is being hunted. That is the cleverest thing anyone in your hall has said all day, Edrin Call said. And if you had said it 9,000 years ago, to the first world you ever named, it might have meant something. But you did not say it to the first world. You said it to me, now, after I filed your whole fleet, because now you are afraid, and a thing that only offers to treat as equals when it is afraid, is not offering anything at all. It is buying time. We know what buying time looks like. We invented it. The captain turned, half away, toward its own crew, and gave an order in the hard, angular human tongue that the nominate could not read, and the bridge of the gray slab moved with a calm and a speed that told Yusa everything she needed to know about how many times these 6 people had done this before. You asked what we are, Edrin Call said, looking back one last time. I told you, we are human, and this is a warship, and you have spent your whole history naming things that wanted to be named. Watch what happens when you meet the one thing that came to name you instead. The dull gray slab, drifting on its slow tumble 40,000 strides off the first tongue, opened its eyes. Issa would try, for years, to describe what she saw next, and she would never find the words, and she was a name-giver, and that was the cruelty of it. The gray coat did not fall away, it simply stopped mattering. The thing under the coat had been there the whole time, and now it let the naming hall see it, and what the hall saw was not a hauler, and not a slab, and not anything the index had a shape for. It was long, and it was dark, and it was deliberate, and every line of it had been made by a people who wrote with tools, and not with brushes. A people of straight lines and patient angles. A people who had decided, a long time ago, in a dark deeper than the nominate had ever looked, that they would never be named, and had built their warships in the shape of that refusal. And then the human warship, which the Empire had tried to identify and failed, which it had filed as a poor dead hauler and let drift into the heart of its holiest fleet, did the thing it had crossed the border to do. It spoke a name. That was the first thing it did, and Issa understood it at once, because it was her own craft turned around and pointed back at her. The human warship spoke a name into the dark, and the name landed on one of the 40 escort ships, the proud lean vessel called, We Have Counted You, and the moment the name touched it, the ship stopped. Not destroyed, stopped, its lights held, its hull held, but everything that had made it a warship of the nominate went out of it at once, the way a word goes out of a thing when you forget it. Its weapons would not arm, its drives would not push. Its crew, Issa would learn later, sat at their stations perfectly alive and perfectly unable to make their proud ship be a ship, because the human warship had reached across 40,000 strides and named it, and what it had named it was harmless. The nominate ruled by naming things and owning them. The human warship had just named a nominate warship as a thing that no longer worked, and the warship had agreed, because that was the terrible logic of the thing, the logic the humans had stolen and sharpened. A thing is what it is named. The nominate had built its whole law on that, and the humans had spent an afternoon learning the law, and were now using it better than the people who wrote it. It is using the index, Issa breathed. It is using our own engine against us. It listened to the index name our ships, and it learned how the names attach, and now it is speaking the names backward. Stop it, Kessenvar said to the watch officer. Shut the index down, now. If it is using our engine, take the engine away from it. The watch officer reached for the great shutdown that no warden had touched in 9,000 years, the switch that would silence the index, the most precious object the nominate owned, the engine of all its law. And the human warship spoke a second name, and the name landed not on a ship, but on the switch itself, on the very command, and the shutdown did not happen, because the human warship had named the shutdown as a thing that would not occur. You cannot turn it off, Edrin Call said, calm on the feed that still glowed in the corner of the great readout. We have spent an hour learning your engine. We know it better than you do now. You only ever used it to name things outside yourselves. You never once turned it on yourselves. Because you were afraid of what it would say. We are not afraid of what it says. We have been turning it on you since the moment your warden touched our wall. The engine answers to us now. It does not know it has changed hands. That is the beauty of an engine that names. It does not care whose mouth speaks the name. It only cares that the name is true. A third name, a fourth. Faithful reckoning stopped. Clear tongue stopped. One by one, around the bright proud ring, the 40 escorts of the first tongue went still, their lights holding, their hulls whole, their crews alive and helpless, each one named by the human warship as a thing that could no longer be a warship, and each one agreeing, because the index agreed, because the index could not tell the difference between the nominate's voice and the voice of the thing that had learned to speak in the nominate's place. There was a young captain in that ring, on the escort called Bright Tally, and Issa would meet her years later and hear the whole of it from her own mouth, so she would always know exactly what it felt like to be named by a human warship. The young captain said, it began as a wrongness in the air, a pressure behind the eyes, the feeling you get when a word you have known your whole life suddenly looks strange on the page. Then it came down through the ship like a tide, not a blow, not a shock, a tide. And where the tide passed, the ship forgot itself. The drives did not break. They forgot they were drives. The weapons did not jam. They forgot they were weapons. The young captain gave the order to fire, and her crew obeyed instantly, and nothing happened, because the order to fire requires a thing that knows it is a weapon, and there was no longer any such thing aboard Bright Tally. She said the worst part was her own hand. She gave the order and reached for the firing key, and her hand stopped halfway, because her hand had forgotten what the key was for, and she sat there, a captain of the nominate, looking at her own hand, resting beside a key it no longer understood, while a gray ship that could not be named rewrote what her vessel was allowed to be. She did not feel pain. None of them felt pain. That was the thing she could never make anyone understand afterward. It did not hurt to be named harmless. It was worse than hurt. It was a great calm certainty descending on 40 warships at once. The certainty that they were not, in fact, warships, that they had been mistaken about themselves, that they were and had always been something quieter and smaller, and the certainty came with the full weight of the index behind it. The same engine the young captain had trusted her whole life to tell her what things were. She trusted it still. That was the trap. She could not stop trusting the index, because the nominate had raised her to trust it absolutely, and so when the index told her, in the human warship's stolen voice, that Bright Tally was no longer a ship of war, the young captain believed it, all the way down, and her ship lay quiet in the dark. Issa watched it happen from the naming hall, and she understood the cruelty of it more deeply than the young captain ever would. The humans were not attacking the fleet. They were attacking the fleet's faith in the engine, and they were doing it by using the engine, so that the faith itself became the weapon. You could not warn the fleet to doubt the index, because doubting the index was the one thing the nominate had spent 9,000 years teaching its people never to do. The humans had found the load-bearing wall, and instead of breaking it, they had simply leaned on it, gently, with the Empire's own full weight, and the wall had held, and the holding was the disaster. Issa watched the ring go dark, ship by ship, and she felt no triumph and no relief, only a vast and terrible understanding, settling over the naming hall like snow. The nominate had never lost. It had never lost because it had never fought anything that did not already know it was beaten. The index named the enemy, and the named enemy was leashed, and the leashed enemy lay down. And now, for the first time in 9,000 years, the leash was on the other neck, and the nominate was learning what every named thing had felt, the moment the name landed, the moment the world agreed you were a thing that no longer worked. "Why are you not killing them?" Issa said. She had to know. It was the name-giver in her, the part that needed the world to make sense. You have stopped 40 warships. You could have burned them. You have not fired a single shot. Why? On the feed, Edrin Call's forward eyes came back to her, and there was that almost respect again, deeper now. "Because killing is the thing your kind does," the captain said. "You name a thing, and you own it. And if it will not be owned, you erase it. And you call the erasing peace. We are not here to teach you our way by doing your way back at you. There is no lesson in that. You already understand burning. You have burned 1,000 worlds that would not be named. If I burned your fleet, you would file me as a thing that burns, and you would go home and build a defense against burning, and in 500 years, you would be back at our border with the burning solved, having learned nothing. I do not want you to learn nothing. I want you to learn the only thing that matters. The captain stood very still on the feed. I want you to learn that you are not the only ones in the dark, and that the dark does not need to burn you, because the dark can simply decide you no longer work, and you will agree, because you taught the whole galaxy that a thing is what it is named, and you never once imagined that someone would come who could name you. The last escort went still. 40 proud warships, the ring of the first tongue, the guard that had never lost, hung in the dark with their lights on and their hearts off, named harmless by a thing the index could not name. And in the center of the dark ring, alone now, undefended, sat the first tongue itself, the holiest ship of the nominate, the engine of all its law, with its 40 guards turned to driftwood around it. The human warship moved. It did not move fast. That was the worst of it, Issa had imagined, in the part of her that still hoped, that there might be a moment of speed, a lunge she could call an attack, a thing she could file as combat, and therefore as something the nominate might one day answer. There was no lunge. The gray ship, the long, dark, deliberate ship, crossed the 40,000 strides at the pace of a thing that knows nothing can be done to it, the pace of a male walking across a room he owns, and it came to rest beside the first tongue, closer than any vessel had been allowed near the holy ship in 9,000 years, and it stopped. Open a channel to the heart of your ship, Edrin Call said. To the engine, to the index itself. I want to speak to it directly, not to you, to the thing you have hidden behind all this time. You cannot speak to the index, Kesson Var said. It is not a person. It does not converse. It names. That is all it does. It will converse with me, the captain said. Open the channel, Warden, or I will open it myself, the way I opened your hatch, and your fleet, and your tongue. You have seen what we can do with names. Do not make me name your engine. You will not like what I name it. Issa looked at Kesson Var, and the old warden looked back at her, and in his eyes she saw the end of 9,000 years. He gave the smallest nod. Issa turned to her station, the station where she had named 1,100 worlds, and with a hand that did not shake, because a name-giver's hand does not shake, she opened the channel to the index. The great readout filled with the gold of the engine. The naming hall had never shown the index's own voice to anyone. It was not done. The engine was a tool, not a speaker, but the human warship had asked, and the human warship could take what it asked for, so Issa gave it freely. The way you give a thing freely, when freely, is the only dignity you have left. Index, Edrin Call said. Do you know what I am? The gold moved. The engine that had named 400 million things, that had stalled and curdled and finally written unnamed, that had been turned in an afternoon to a tool that spoke against its own makers, answered the captain of the human warship directly, and the answer was the truest thing it had ever produced. No. That is correct, the captain said. You do not know what I am. You will never know what I am. I am a thing that came from the part of the dark you decided was empty, and I am crewed by a species that refused, 10,000 years ago, to ever have a name, and your whole nature is to name, and so I am the one object in the galaxy that you cannot do your single task upon. Do you understand what that makes you, Index? It makes you a key that has finally met a door with no lock. You are very good at opening doors. You have opened 400 million doors. And here is a door, right in front of you, that has no lock at all, and you are still trying to find the lock. And you will try forever, because that is what you are, and you cannot stop being what you are. The gold did not move. The engine had no answer. For the first time in 9,000 years, the index had met a question it could not file, and it sat in its own gold light, reaching, the way it had reached at the very start. Object exceeds index. Provide reference. No reference exists. The engine talking to itself. Forever now, in front of the thing that had broken it. Issa watched the gold reach and fail and reach again, and she felt something she had no right to feel, which was pity. Pity for an engine. Pity for the cold, flawless machine she had served her whole life. The index was not cruel. It had never been cruel. It had only ever done the one thing it was made to do. which was to look at the world and say what the world was. Cleanly, without fear, without doubt. It had named 400 million things and never once flinched, because nothing it had ever named had been able to flinch back. And now, at the very end of its certainty, it sat in front of a thing that could not be named, and it did not rage, and it did not break, because engines do not rage, and the humans had not broken it. It simply kept doing its one task, forever, against an object that had no answer, and Yisa understood that this was the most terrible thing the captain could have done to it, far worse than switching it off. To switch it off would have been a death, and death's end. This was not a death. This was the engine being made to fail at its single purpose, gently, endlessly, and being left fully alive to know it. "You feel sorry for it," Edrin Call said, and Yisa startled, because she had not spoken, and the captain had read the pity off her face through a feed across 40,000 strides the way it read everything. "Good. That is the first true thing anyone in your hall has felt today. You have spent your lives serving this engine, and you have never once felt sorry for it. Because it never gave you reason to, because it never failed. Now it has failed, and you feel sorry for it. And that feeling is the beginning of the only wisdom your kind has ever lacked. You learned today that your engine can suffer. Tomorrow, if you are very lucky, you will begin to wonder whether the things it named could suffer too. The 1,000 worlds, the 900 species. Every one of them stood where your engine stands now, the day the index spoke their name, and felt the world agree they were a thing that could be owned. You never felt sorry for any of them. You will. Now. That is also the work. The gold reached, and failed, and reached again. The engine talked to itself in the language of its own undoing. And Yisa Telmar, senior name-giver of the Tassari Nominate, stood in the holiest hall of the most certain civilization in the arm, and wept, quietly, for a machine, while the thing that had broken it watched her with something that was almost approval. "I am not going to destroy you," Edrin Call said to the index, gently, the way it had told Seville to sit down. "Your makers would not understand it if I did. They would file me as a thing that destroys, and they would learn nothing. I am going to do something they will understand even less, and it will take them a very long time, perhaps another 9,000 years, to learn the lesson in it. I am going to leave you exactly as you are, working, perfect, naming everything that wants to be named, the way you always have, and I am going to leave inside you the single fact that you could not name me. You will carry that fact in your heart forever. Every time you name a world, you will name it and own it, and the makers will smile, and somewhere underneath, in the place where you keep the things that exceed the index, there will be one entry that will never close, and the entry will be me, and you will know, every day, for the rest of your existence, that you are not the engine that names everything. You are only the engine that names everything that agreed to be named. There is a difference. You learned it today. You will never unlearn it." The naming hall was utterly silent. Issa stood at her station with her hand on the cold gold, and she understood that she was watching something far worse than the destruction of the Nominate, because the Nominate could survive destruction, could rebuild, could come back in 500 years with the burning solved. The Nominate could not survive this. The human warship had not broken its fleet, though it had stopped its fleet. It had not broken its engine, though it had spoken through it. It had broken the one thing the Nominate could not rebuild, which was its certainty, the deep and ancient certainty that to name a thing was to know a thing, and that the galaxy held nothing that could not be named. That certainty was gone now. It had drifted into the lane wearing a hauler's coat, and it had let itself be misread, and it had walked the wardens to the bridge, and it had filed the fleet, and it had spoken through the engine, and it had named the namers, and it had won without firing a shot, the way the Nominate itself had always won, except that the Nominate had needed 9,000 years, and the human warship had needed an afternoon. "Captain Call," Issa said. Her voice was very quiet now. "What happens to us?" "Nothing happens to you," Edrin Call said. "That is the part you will find hardest to believe, so I will say it plainly. We are not going to take your worlds. We are not going to take your ships. We are not going to take your engine. We came across the border for one reason, and the reason was not conquest, because we do not want what you have. We want what you stopped doing. You stopped looking at the dark. You decided it was empty because it was easier than knowing it was not. We came to be the thing in the dark that you finally see. That is all. You have seen us. The work is done. Issa stared at the feed. After everything, after the stopped fleet and the broken engine and the named namers, the human captain was telling her that the Empire would keep its worlds. It did not make sense. Nothing in 9,000 years of method made sense of it. You did not break a thing this completely, and then walk away. You expect me to believe you will simply leave, she said. I expect you to spend the rest of your life learning to believe it, the captain said. That is the lesson. You took a great deal from a great many, and every one of them was sure that taking was how the galaxy worked, because you were the strongest thing they had ever met, and the strongest thing always takes. We are stronger than you. We have just proven it past any argument, and we are not taking anything. Sit with that, name giver. Let it cost you something, because the day will come, long after I am gone, when one of your wardens stands over a world that will not be named. A small, poor, stubborn world that refuses the leash, and your warden will reach for the old method, the burning, the erasing, and somewhere in the back of his mind there will be a gray ship that could have erased your whole empire and chose not to. And maybe, because of that, your warden will lower his hand. That is what we came to leave you. Not fear. A doubt. Doubt is the only thing strong enough to change a thing like you. The human warship began to release the fleet. It did it the way it had done everything, slowly, one ship at a time, with no hurry and no mercy, and no cruelty either, just method, the cold, clean method of a people who wrote with tools. It spoke the names backward, and the names let go, and one by one, the 40 escorts of the first tongue came back to life, their weapons arming, their drives pushing, their crews finding their proud ships were ships again, and not one of them fired. Issa watched the readout, certain that some young captain somewhere in the ring, freed and furious and shamed, would loose a single shot at the gray ship out of pride. None did. They had all watched the same thing she had watched. They had all learned the same thing. You do not fire on the dark when the dark has just chosen, in front of you, not to fire on you. Your wardens may leave my ship, the captain said. The hatch turns again. Seville, you walked a long way. Walk back. Tell them what you saw. Tell them all of it. Leave nothing out. That is the only thing we ask of you, and it is not really a request, because we both know you cannot help but tell it. On the cutter feed, Issa saw the manual wheel turn under Seville's gloved hand. She saw the hatch open onto the cold dark and the waiting cutter. She saw the warden pause at the threshold and look back, once, into the warm-lit curving corridors of the human warship, and she would have given a great deal to know what passed through him in that moment. The male who had named 900 species, and had just walked through the one no one could name. He said nothing. He crossed the gap on his tether and he came home. When the cutter docked and the 6 wardens came back aboard the first tongue, they were not the same wardens who had left. Issa was on the docking deck to meet them, because she had to see Seville's face with her own eyes, and what she saw there, she would remember as clearly as anything from that day. He was not afraid. The fear had burned off somewhere in the curving corridors, and left behind a thing she had no name for, a kind of quiet that was not peace, and was not despair, the quiet of a male who has been shown the true size of the world, and has decided he is going to have to live the rest of his life knowing it. He looked at her, and he held something out in his gloved hand, and it was one of the 6 cups from the galley. He had taken it. No one had stopped him. She understood, later, that the humans had let him take it, that they had wanted one of the 6 cups to come aboard the first tongue, because a cup is a small ordinary thing, and a small ordinary thing carried home by a frightened warden tells a better story, over the years, than any weapon ever could. They told me to take it, Seville said. The captain said, take one, so that when your masters do not believe you, you will have a thing in your hand that came from a ship that does not exist. He turned the cup over. It was plain, and gray, and warm still, faintly, the way everything aboard that ship had been warm. I asked the captain why they were doing all this. Why go to such trouble? Why not simply burn us, or simply leave? And the captain looked at me, name giver, the way you look at a child who has asked a question you have waited a long time for someone to ask, and it said, because someone did this for us, once, a long time ago. Someone crossed the dark to a young, loud people who were about to be eaten, and instead of taking them, taught them, and we have been paying that debt forward ever since, to every young, loud empire we find, because it is the only thing worth doing with what we learned. That is what the captain said, and then it told me to go home and tell you all of it, and leave nothing out. Issa looked at the warm gray cup in the warden's hand, and she understood that the humans had not come to conquer the nominate, and had not come merely to humble it. They had come to do for the nominate what had once been done for them, in the worst hour their kind had ever known. They had come to teach a young, loud people, before the dark could eat it, that the dark was not empty, and that being known was not the same as being safe. It was the strangest mercy Issa had ever heard of, and it was delivered by the most powerful thing she had ever seen, and the two facts together broke something in her, and remade it, all at once, on the docking deck, with a warm gray cup between her and an old warden who would never be the same. The human warship pulled away from the first tongue. It put the 40,000 strides back between itself and the holy ship, slowly, the way it had crossed them, and then it kept going, out toward the border, toward the part of the dark the nominate had spent 9,000 years calling empty. The gray coat came back over it as it went, the dull poor hauler's face settling over the long, deliberate hull, so that the last thing the naming hall's instruments saw before the ship passed out of range was a cold, dead cargo hauler named the Wandering Larch, drifting away into the dark, exactly the way it had drifted in. "Captain Call," Issa said, before the channel could close. She did not know why she said it. The name-giver in her needed one more thing named. "You said you came from the part of the dark we called empty. How much of it is not empty? How many of you are there?" The feed held for a moment, the forward eyes considered her, and there was, at the very end, something that might almost have been kindness. The kindness of a thing that has decided you are worth one last true sentence. "That is the right question," Edrin Call said. "It is the question you should have asked 9,000 years ago, before you decided the dark was yours to fill. I am not going to answer it. If I answered it, you would file the answer, and a filed fear is a small fear, and we did not come all this way to give you a small fear. I will tell you only this. We are the smallest ship we have. We sent the smallest ship, with the smallest crew, in the oldest coat we own, to a border we have watched for a very long time. Think about what that means, name-giver. Think about it every day. We will know if you have learned it, because if you have learned it, you will never come past your own border again, and the dark will let you keep your worlds, and your engine will go on naming everything that wants to be named, and we will go on being the thing it cannot name, and that will be peace. It is the only peace there has ever been between a thing that names and a thing that refuses to be named. I hope, for your sake, that you can hold it. We can hold it forever. We have nothing but time, and a dark you have never seen the edge of, and a great many ships larger than this one." The channel closed. The gray ship was gone. The 40 escorts hung in the dark, whole and humbled and silent. The first tongue rode in the center of its ring, the engine of all its law still glowing gold, still working, still perfect, still carrying. In the place where it kept the things that exceeded the index, one entry that would never close. And Issa Telmar stood at her station, where she had named 1,100 worlds, and understood that she would never name another world the same way again, because she finally knew the thing her whole craft had been built to hide, which was that naming a thing is not the same as knowing it, and that the galaxy is full of things that have decided, in a dark deeper than any engine can reach, never to be known at all. Kesunvar came and stood beside her. The old warden was quiet for a long time, watching the place where the gray ship had been. "We will report this to the inmost tongue," he said at last, "and the inmost tongue will not believe it. They will say the index does not fail. They will say a name-giver and a warden of the watch lost their nerve before a clever hauler. They will want to send a fleet across the border to find the thing that humbled us and name it properly." "Will they send the fleet?" Issa said. Kesunvar was quiet again. "I will tell them what the captain told me," he said. "I will tell them it was the smallest ship the humans have. I will tell them it stopped 40 of our best without firing, and broke our engine without touching it, and named our whole fleet in an afternoon, and then chose to leave us everything we own. And I will let them sit with the same arithmetic the captain left me." He looked at her. "If the smallest ship can do that, and chose not to take a single world, then the question is not whether we can win across the border. The question is, what kind of thing chooses not to win when it so easily could? I have hunted across this arm for 9,000 years, name-giver. I have never met a thing that could destroy me, and chose not to. I do not think the inmost tongue will send the fleet, once they have done the arithmetic. I think they will do what frightened strong things have always done, when they meet something stronger and kinder than themselves. I think they will sit very still, and keep their worlds, and never look at the dark again, and call it wisdom. Issa thought he was probably right. She would learn, in the years that followed, that he was exactly right. The inmost tongue heard the report. The inmost tongue raged, and doubted, and demanded the index be tested, and the index was tested, and the index named 400 million things without error, exactly as before. Perfect, flawless, certain. And then a young name-giver, on a dare, fed the index the registry of a cargo hauler named the Wandering Larch, and asked the engine the only question that mattered, and the engine, the perfect, flawless, certain engine, stalled, and curdled, and wrote, in a gold the color of old blood, the entry that would never close. Object exceeds index. No reference exists. And the young name-giver went pale, and stopped the test, and never spoke of it again, and the nominate quietly, without ever admitting why, drew its border in tighter, and stopped its long, slow naming of the dark, and turned its great patient face inward, toward the worlds it already owned, and left the empty part of the galaxy alone. It was not empty, they knew that now, they would always know it. That was the doubt the gray ship had left, and the doubt did the work the captain had promised it would do. Somewhere, 20 years later, a warden stood over a small, poor, stubborn world that refused the leash, and reached for the old method, and remembered a hauler that could have erased an empire and chose not to, and lowered his hand. Issa heard about it. She was old by then. She wept, and she did not entirely understand why, except that it was the first time in 9,000 years that the nominate had chosen not to take a thing it could have taken, and the choice had come from a doubt that a human warship had planted in the dark, on purpose, knowing it would grow. She lived a long time after that day. She never named another world. She asked to be moved from the naming floor, and the inmost tongue, which owed her more than it would ever say, gave her a quiet post on the edge of the border, watching the dark. She spent the rest of her years there, an old name-giver at the edge of the empty part of the galaxy that was not empty, watching for a gray ship she knew she would never see again, because the humans only sent the smallest ship when they wanted to be misread, and they had no reason to be misread by the nominate ever again. It was at the border post, years later, that she met the young captain of Bright Tally, who had grown older too, and who had also asked to leave the fleet, for reasons neither of them ever said aloud, because they did not need to. The young captain came to the border post one cold watch, and the two of them sat together a long time without speaking, the name-giver, who could no longer name, and the captain whose ship had been named Harmless, both of them watching the dark that was not empty, and after a while, the young captain said, the thing she had carried for years. I gave the order to fire, the young captain said. I want you to know that. When it came down through my ship, that tide, that calm, I fought it. I gave the order, and I reached for the key, and my hand stopped, and I have wondered every day since whether a better captain would have made the hand finish, whether there was a captain somewhere in that ring who beat it, who fired, who was simply stronger than I was. There was not, Issa said. You cannot know that. I can, Issa said. I have thought about nothing else for years. The human captain did not need us to be weak. It needed us to trust our engine, and we did trust our engine, every one of us, because the nominate raised us to. The stronger a captain was, the more she trusted the index, and the more she trusted the index, the more completely she believed it when it told her ship to lie down. Your strength was not the thing that failed you. Your strength was the lever they used. The strongest captain in the ring would have fired last and surrendered hardest, because she would have believed the engine most. You did nothing wrong. You did the only thing a daughter of the nominate could do. That is the whole horror of it. There was no better captain. There was only us, and what we had been made into, and a thing in the dark that understood exactly what we had been made into, and used it as gently as a hand turning a key. The young captain was quiet a long time. Then she said, Do you think they are still out there? I know they are, Issa said. They told us they were the smallest ship. A people does not send its smallest ship to its largest neighbor, unless the rest of the fleet is a thing it does not wish us to imagine. They are out there. They will always be out there, and they will leave us alone, exactly as they promised, for exactly as long as we leave the dark alone. Because that is the bargain, and they are a people who keep bargains, having learned the cost of the alternative in a school we cannot picture. We will keep our worlds. We will keep our engine. We will keep everything we ever took. And every year there will be fewer of us who remember why we stopped reaching for more, until one day, the nominate forgets, the way empires forget, and grows bold again, and looks out at the dark and decides it is empty after all. And on that day, Captain, the dark will send its smallest ship again, in its oldest coat, and it will drift into our lane looking like a poor dead hauler, and it will teach us the lesson one more time, as gently and as completely as it taught us before. That is what eternity looks like for a people who refuse to be named. They can afford to teach the same lesson forever. We cannot afford to forget it even once. The young captain went back to her own watch after that, and Yusa never saw her again. But she thought of her often, the two of them sitting in the cold at the edge of the dark, both undone in the same gentle way by the same gray ship, both keeping a bargain neither of them had agreed to, and neither of them would ever break. But sometimes, on the long quiet watches, she would feed the index a thing she had built herself, a small false registry, a hauler that did not exist, and ask the engine what it was, and the engine would name it, of course, cleanly, perfectly, because it was a false thing, and false things have the names you give them. And Issa would sit with the clean gold name on her readout, the easy answer, the comfort, the leash, and she would think about the one entry deep in the engine's heart that would never close, and she would understand, every time, more deeply than the time before, the thing the human captain had given his whole long visit to teach. There is a difference between the engine that names everything and the engine that names everything that agreed to be named. The nominate had thought it was the first. For 9,000 years it had been so sure. And then, on an ordinary watch, in an ordinary lane, a poor dead cargo hauler had drifted into the heart of its holiest fleet, and the index had stopped, for the first time, and would not give an answer. It had not been a hauler. It had been the smallest ship the humans owned, in the oldest coat they had, crewed by 6 people of a species that had refused, 10,000 years before, ever to have a name. It had crossed a border to be misread on purpose. It had let itself be boarded so it could speak. It had filed a fleet and broken an engine and named the namers, and won without firing a shot, the way the nominate itself had always won. And then, when it could have taken everything, it had taken nothing, and left instead a single doubt, and drifted back out into the dark it came from, the dark that was not empty, the dark the Empire had spent 9,000 years pretending was theirs. The Empire had tried to identify the ship. It had failed. And by the time it understood that the failure was the whole point, that there had never been any name to find, that the thing it could not name had come across the border precisely because it could not be named, and wanted the namers to learn what that felt like at last, the gray ship was already gone, back into the deep dark, where a great many larger ships waited, patient, unnamed, watching a border the nominate would never cross again. Emise Telmar died at the edge of that dark, an old name-giver who had stopped naming, watching the place where the empty part of the galaxy began. They asked her, near the end, what she had seen that day, all those years ago, the day the index stalled. She had told the story 100 times, and each time she had tried to find the words, and each time the words had failed her, because she was a name-giver, and the one thing she had met could not be named. So she answered the way she had learned to answer, in the long, quiet years at the border, the only answer that was true. We tried to identify the ship, she said, and then we learned, too late, that it was human. And the difference between those two sentences is the whole of everything I know. Then she turned her old eyes back to the dark and watched it, the way she had watched it for 40 years, the way the nominate would watch it forever now, with the doubt the gray ship had planted growing quietly in the deep heart of an engine that named everything except the one thing that had ever mattered. The dark watched back. It was not empty. It never had been.